I remember once, it was, I think it was after Pesach. One of my years in yeshiva. My years in yeshiva were Mem Gimel, Mem Dal, Mem Hey. That's what I was in yeshiva. Before Shlichus. The best years of a person's life were by the Rebbe. Pardon me. And the Rebbe started speaking about Masechta Seita. Our minig is to learn Masechta Seita during Daf Layim. The other people learn, Misnagdim learn Shuas. And I'm a good Misnagid for many years. I learned Shuas. We learn Seita, we learn Shuas. I haven't told anybody because I don't want to get lynched, but
Maybe we should lynch you now.
It says in Ayem Yem, they took it out. They took it out. No, the Rebbe took it out. In the first print. But the minute to learn Seita, and there's an explanation up here, it makes sense. But Seita is so much easier. Shvutz yeshivish Masechta. Shvutz is very hard.
They get what they want. They get what they want. We get what we want.
In other words, they get to work hard and we get to be lazy. Don't put yourself down.
We do it lishma.
Oh, I love it. We're so wonderful. Just ask me, I'll tell you how wonderful I am. We do it for tshuva. And ein other mevevede emknechas beruch shtus. And the Seita is the infant shtus, beruch shtus. That's why we learn Seita. Aminut. So the Rebbe after Pesach, and the Rebbe started Sikha by saying, the way the Rebbe started Sikha, Asadadav in the Flinu. This is one of those things about the Rebbe which actually drives you mad. Mitad Echad, the Rebbe's vision, I don't think there's a question, but I told you before, it's true, that the Hachlot Gebur Leiz Tzad, the Babich Shlichus. And Shlichus is Mesiris Nefesh Ruchni, going on Shlichus is not just hard physically. You'll be probably more Chassidish, if you live surrounded by fellow Chassidim. You go to a place, you raise your children. The fact that the Rubam Kekulam of the children of the Shluchim remain frum is a nesfa epiteva. It's impossible to explain. We don't appreciate how, when you're inside the miracle, you don't see it. The Rebbe carries Shluchim. He goes with every Shlich and Shlichus, and he protects him. And her. And the Kinderlach. He protects them. Unbelievable. The truth is, one of the greatest unseen miracles of Shlichus is that the Kinder remain edlich. But they pay the price. There's a price. For Shlichus is a very high price. I don't think there's a question that we're Shlich. The Rebbe made a position. Hachlot gemur le'ezet tzad Shlichus. But on the other hand, the Rebbe also had stuff, which is the other side of the coin. So here the Rebbe comes along, and the Rebbe says that there is a v'neflinu. V'neflinu means things that make us special, unique. Like you have much as Gitisa, v'neflinu ani v'yamcha. In other words, things that only Chassidim have. And the Rebbe spoke about Masechta Seita, and the Rebbe complained how come nobody talks about Masechta Seita. This is things that Lubavitch Chassidim do. This is not Shlichus, Fakir. This is the opposite of Shlichus. It's for ourselves to learn Masechta a Daf Gemara and so on. A kid said, so there are things that are part of Lubavitch, but that are antithetical, that seem antithetical to the whole Hachlata Gemura le'ezet tzad of Shlichus. Somebody actually went over to me. You have to understand, I prepared this for bringen. They say the worst thing preparing this for I didn't come here and start to talk. I know what I wanted to talk about, and I'm not going to say it. I spoke about the topics that I talked about. The Yinfa Tshuva, I wanted to talk about the Yinfa Shlichus. I have to great what I wanted to say, and more or less I said that I wanted to say. So a guy tells me, your second sikha and your third sikha were says to one another. Because the whole point of the second talk was tshuva. The whole point of the third talk was mimakad of somebody else. How does that work together? So I said to him, the constant between tshuva, iskafia, v'ishapcha, and the idea of shlichus is that you're going out of limitations. Tshuva is going out of limitations, and the shlichus is for sure going out of limitations, just to have in common. So the Rebbe, in his Nesiyas, invested himself in many, many things. A lot of things he invested himself on the gate to the ganze Welt. And I don't think there's even a question that the Rebbe is synonymous with kiruv, pashat. Finding a Jew that doesn't know anything and teaching him Aleph Beit. By the Rebbe, that's the first thing on the list. Mamish. I don't think there's been a question about it. I don't know if you ever see, there was a Jew who lived in London. I met him 1 month before he passed away. It was very fortuitous. He passed away young. His name was Ephraim Hager. I think he was a Kohen. Ephraim Hager, huh? He's the Einik of the Vishnitzer, yeah. So Rebbe, Freddie Hager. I'm the only person who calls him Ephraim. Everybody calls him Freddie Hager. I met him, I was there for the Rishon at Iber. They brought me for Vata Tetzaveh to teach Vata Tetzaveh. He passed away before Pesach that year. It was very upsetting. He came and hung out Friday night. He spent the Friday night verbringen with me. So he has beautiful interviews from Jem that have been meforsim. You know, Jem used to have a feature. They used to have a feature that was called My Encounter with the Rebbe. I think we should break down the doors of Jem and say we want back the My Encounter. This new 7 for 70, it's 70 for 700. It's 70 installments is a year and 3 months. They're into 5 years. They got to go back to My Encounter. They have to let people tell stories of their relationship with the Rebbe. The most important part of Jem was not seeing the Rebbe. It was seeing people talk about the Rebbe, and they took that away. Simcha. It's on video. It's on record. I deny. It's on the record. But they have to go back. My Encounter was so special. And they have thousands of hours. They recorded hours and hours of each person telling their stories. And they're saving them for Tchias HaMesach, not for Yemei HaMashiach. For Elam HaTchiyah, for Elef HaShvir, they're saving it. Anyway, so he has, this Freddie Hager, Ephraim Hager, has Moidenik Shtikalach. He was a college boy. I don't know if he's from, I think he's about Tshuva. If he's not about Tshuva, he certainly was not from a Lubavitcher home. He was in college, the same time more or less that Harav Sachs, Jonathan Sachs, was in college. And the Lubavitch was doing outward just in the early 70s, late 60s. And there was some cool chevra living in London. Rebbe Tzion Shem Tov, Rebbe Mendel Futafas. Sigeven chevra, there was something to be drawn to. If you ever saw Dr. Sachs, Jonathan Sachs, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs speak, he says, I saw Jews. He says, I saw Jews who prayed. And after they prayed, they were different than before they prayed. He says, I saw Yidden from gedavend. Und noch ein Davenen, sein gewinn anders. He says, I saw people daven. But they didn't daven like we daven. They davened. When they finished davening, they were different than before. See, he was around then at the same time, the early 70s, late 60s. A kid said he was involved with Rabbi Lou. Rabbi Lou was doing campus work then, and whoever it was. I mean, everybody was very young. So then, in London, there were a bunch of big, some of the famous universities in the world. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, that they came to the Rebbe from the OU. This is a parenthesis. They came to the Rebbe from the OU, from the Orthodox Union. OU is today, OU is yeshiva from. OU today is very erlich. But OU then was like the equivalent of Young Israel, but you would call them modern Orthodox. And they had day schools all over America. K through 12. You're talking the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then, people don't know this. It was common for kids from modern Orthodox home to get a full Talmud Torah education, go off to college, and become Poshet Kipshute Frei. More than now, a lot more than now. No one talks about it, but the OTD then was worse. And then every boy who was raised in a yeshiva was a Yakara Matthias, because most Americans went to public school. Even frum people took for granted the kids went to public school. So the OU built these schools, whatever they called them, K through 12. That means they didn't go till 3rd grade or till 6th grade. They went till high school, through high school, learning in a yeshiva. And half a day they learned Torah, they went off to college, became frei. So they came to the Rebbe. And the guy who does the interview says they went to many Gedolim. They went to Chassidish Gedolim, they went to the Satmar Rav, they went to Rabbi Yossi Paltiel, to the Rav of Yeshiva University, to many Rabbanim. Then Stama went to the Moshe Feinstein. And they said, what do we do? And everyone had different eitzes. One guy's eitzah was, don't let him go to college. Very helpful. The mamish going to listen. Yeah. Another guy's eitzah was, let him become frei. Make a base medrash. And then they came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, make kosher kitchens. That the boys and the girls should hang out together. Not separate, hang out together. But boys and girls who are Jewish in university, they should hang out together, make a kosher kitchen. So the guy who did the interview said, we went to many Gedolim, They all gave us advice. But the Rebbe's advice worked. They didn't need shiurim. They didn't need lectures. They needed to be with other people like themselves. The minute they made a kosher kitchen, so they got together to eat. And they were together socially. I don't know if you know this. Today, there are many Chabad houses in America that cater to modern Orthodox. Their number one group on campus is from people, from boys and girls. And if not for Chabad houses, I was at a modern Orthodox wedding. It was a mixed wedding. The dancing was separate, the seating was mixed. Under the chuppah, the Chabad shliach spoke. Because if not for the Chabad shliach, there would not have been a chuppah. They're in Pasha, they're keeping them from. They go, and they're very academic. The problem with Lubavitch is they got to find people who can teach them Daf Yomi, which is a shtickle problem with Lubavitch. so they got to find an Andreginus, there's enough Lubavitch to teach them Daf Yomi. But they're keeping them from. And then at the Daf Yomi is not keeping them from. The Daf Yomi is letting them to come into the Beis Chabad. But the socializing is very important. They would make kosher kitchens. Now this is the 70s. In London, there was no thing as a kosher kitchen. And they had what was called kosher food plans. When you go to school, you have to pay for everything separate. You pay for the tuition, you have to pay for your apartment, you pay for food plans. Single people, boys and girls. So you get on a food plan. So the school has food plans, there's private food plans, and they made a kosher food plan. And this guy, Freddie Hager, said I didn't do too much studying in university. He made a business. He would go from every day from school to school all over London, delivering kosher food packages to students who joined up for this kosher food plan. Then they had the idea to make kosher kitchens. And that was a game changer. In other words, they're not going to bring food to every campus. Every campus can have a place where kosher students, doesn't be from Jewish students who want to eat kosher, would get together and there'd be kosher food. So Ephraim Hager, while still in school, has a yeshiva with the Rebbe. He came to New York. And I don't know if you know his story. He's a Hager, yeah, you said he's a vision technical. He's a from Grace Rebbe's. He came into the Rebbe and he told the Rebbe that he's an Einikol from Grace Tzadikim. And the Rebbe asked him if he has a picture of his grandfather who was a big tzaddik. He said, yeah. So the Rebbe said, can I see it? And they showed him a picture of one of the great Rebbes. I don't know which Rebbe it was. And the Rebbe said, can I keep the picture? So he says, yeah, I have another copy. And the Rebbe turned it over and wrote something on the back, and he kept it. A picture of Freddie Hager Zayde, from some of the visions to Mishpach. The visions to the Rebbe is a Hager. So he's talking to the Rebbe about the kosher kitchens. It was one step after the kosher food plan, where they would deliver to the different kind of universities that had a kosher kitchen at several campuses in London. And as he's standing by the Rebbe, he says, you know what we'll do? We'll make shiurim. Rabbis will come in and we'll have lectures. He started to speak grandiose, all the wonderful things they can do now that they have a place for Jewish students to gather. So the Rebbe raises his hand, like, stop. Yeah. And the Rebbe was talking to him in English. And the Rebbe says to him, quote, this is not what I have in mind. What I have in mind is a Jewish boy sits down to eat a kosher meal. And next to him sits down a Jewish girl to eat a kosher meal. And they start to talk. And maybe they like each other. And they decide to meet. And maybe they'll get married. For the Rebbe, that was enough. For the Rebbe, that was enough. I mean, obviously, the greatest thing that can happen to any shliach is to send a boy or a girl to yeshiva. You go to yeshiva, it's a different experience. I know many Baalei Tshuva, who never went to yeshiva. They got married. Either they became from after they got married, or they get from when they're already working. And I tell them, I just met a guy this past Shabbos. He's Baal Tshuva, and he's struggling because his parents are not happy about it. So I asked him, he's going to law school, he has a few months off. I said, could you get away for 3 months? 3 months. And go learn full-time in a yeshiva. 3 months. Full-time. You know, a lot of Lubavitcher boys who had terrible yeshiva experiences. They hate everything about the yeshiva. When they're older and they're not afraid anymore, go back to yeshiva. They don't go to the same place with the same nudnik. They go to a different nudnik, yeah? 3 months. 3 months, they were a different person. They're a different person. It's not just the learning. How much are you going to learn in 3 months? It's the surround sound, the being 24 hours a day in the environment of Torah. It changes you. My father told me, that in in the 50s, the Rebbe used to officiate at the weddings. That was Inside Chassidus. And the Rebbe had two rules. If you wanted the Rebbe to be Inside Chassidus, you had to agree to two things. Number one, a sheitel. The Rebbe didn't want that the girls should cover their hair. He wanted a sheitel. The girls would say to the Rebbe, I'm going to wear a tichel, I'm going to wear a kerchief, I'm going to wear a hat. He said, no, I want a sheitel. But the Rebbe did not care if the sheitel would look like natural hair. The Rebbe said, I don't care if it's beautiful, but a sheitel. The Rebbe actually said once that if a girl is wearing a hat and she's going to be taking a picture and she's wanting to look pretty, she's going to take her hat off and she's going to be Gili Arash. The Rebbe wanted dafka sheitel, and the Rebbe did not mind that the sheitel was so beautiful it looked like natural hair, but he wanted a sheitel. And the other condition was a beard, a full beard. Now these were Lubavitcher boys and girls. This was not Lubavitcher boys and girls. But this was the generation of Lubavitchers who grew up during the war. They went to work when they were 14. This generation is dying, really. Shalom Ber Drizin is the last from that generation. Michal Raskin, Berel Raskin, maybe, no, it's just younger. Maybe Rabashkin, Gavriel is from that generation. Fine, but he was a Bach in yeshiva. There were two types. There were a lot of the Russians who never went to yeshiva. They grew up during the war, and they worked to support their mothers. They didn't have fathers, And they never went to yeshiva. Michal Raskin slaved. They literally worked 16 hours a day, 2 full-time jobs, to bring home enough money so the mother could feed the 4 boys, and the 2 younger ones, Ben Zion and Lane, so gesund sein, should go to yeshiva. But Berel and Michal worked from the time they were 14, 15 years old. They worked they became successful, but they were not born successful. They were born slaving away. When they became Chassan Kale, so the Rebbe asked, so they would go into the Rebbe as a couple. And they would ask the Rebbe to be inside the Kedushin, and the Rebbe would say, the 2 conditions, abod mit ha-sheitel, and they would agree, and then the Rebbe would smile, and the Rebbe would say, Siddur Kedushin belongs to the Kala. So the Kala had to re-ask. It was almost like a choreography. They went in together, they wrote in the note that they should ask the Rebbe to officiate at their wedding, and the Rebbe would say, there's 2 conditions, abod mit ha-sheitel. And then they would say to the Rebbe, we decided that we're going to wear sheitel and wear a beard. For them it was a big Mesiras Nefesh. They were Lubavitcher boys. Their Zaydus learned in Lubavitch. But they were Russians, peasants. They were not educated. They grew up, they knew how to kill and be killed. That's what they knew. They grew up in the Holocaust. It was a big deal for them. And the Rebbe was like a father to them. Berel Raskin told me, so I went to him like my father. I met a girl, I liked her, I told the Rebbe I want to marry. The Rebbe said, yeah, I think it's a good idea. They went into the Rebbe like a son goes to a father. And the Rebbe was a father to these people. I was once in his sukkah, he told this to me personally. And the Rebbe would smile and say, Siddur Kedushin belongs to the Kala, and the Kala would have to open up her mouth, which was not easy, and say, we're asking the Rebbe inside the Kedushin, and the Rebbe would say he's happy to do it. They used to have long engagements in those days, 6-7 months. So the Rebbe would say, Michal Raskin, my father told me about, he wasn't the only one, but Michal Raskin, my father told me about. The Rebbe said to him, maybe you'll take off a few months of work and go away to yeshiva to learn. This was a guy who was so tough. He was so tough. He was a street guy. Take off 3 months and go to learn. So I'm going to tell you, he went to learn. And the Rebbe used to send a message to the Bach of Montreal that they should learn with him. So you're talking, my father was probably 20, he was probably 28, 29, much older, but he never learned. And they pushed it sat 3 months. By the time he came to his chuppah, he was a different person. A few months. He was the person who got engaged was not the same person that went to a par chadash yeshiva. It's life changing. It's mamish. A few months in yeshiva, full time yeshiva, it's life changing. And this is an opportunity. If a person could pull. My shvager told me when he was in Morristown, Yehuda Landis showed up. The guy was in his 50s, a very successful psychiatrist. He showed up in Morristown. He hung out with the Bach and made him crazy. They made him crazy. What are you doing here? He said, I decided you can't be religious if you don't go to yeshiva. He went for 3 weeks. He was a successful man. He wanted to be 24 hours a day. He wanted to experience that experience of being totally immersed in Teda. Anyway, I digress. If we can wind back the tape, the topic that we're talking about is Vindeflino. there's a side of the Rebbe which is very exclusive. On the one hand, the Rebbe is all about Kiruv. And there's no question about it. There's no question that the Rebbe has his mind on a boy and a girl sitting in a kosher restaurant, in a kosher store, in a kosher kitchen and dating. They wasn't afraid of Shomer Nagiya. He was afraid of a Yid Manga Goy. That's what he was afraid of. You know, Shleima Schwartz, Allah Shalom, made 600 chuppahs for Jewish boys and girls. They were not from 600 chuppahs. That means 600 Jewish boys married 600 Jewish girls because of Rabbi Shlomo Schwartz. You know what that means? In other words, he wasn't trying to make him send him to yeshiva. There's someone else to do that. I gotta make him marry Jewish, because that's the ground level. You understand? That's the street. That's the Rebbe. That's where the Rebbe lives. Not that the Rebbe is saying, I don't care about them going to yeshiva. He said, but this is in the language of the walkie-talkie. What do they call those things? The shortwave radio they have in the cars. Breaker 09, Breaker 09. What's it called? Age yourself, what are they called? Walkie-talkie, they have a name, huh? Oh man, you're too young. What are they called? Breaker 09, Breaker 09? The CB radio, was the metal to the pedal. Put the pedal to the metal. Where the rubber hits the road. Where the rubber hits the road, there's a Jewish married a Jew. That's where the Rebbe lived. But there's another side to this Rebbe, which is the opposite extreme. And you wonder how this Rebbe could swing like this, from on the one hand, as we say so incorrectly, the Rebbe is so open-minded, you know. The Rebbe is not open-minded, the Rebbe is a Rebbe. And he's going to meet every Jew where he is. He's not going to say, I can't go down to that level because that Jew is too low. If the Jew is there, I'm going down to meet him where he is. But on the other hand, the Rebbe is a Rebbe. He's a tzaddik. So there's another side to the Rebbe, which is chinuch al taras hakedesh. How we raise our own children. And it's so far away from the world of shlichus. I have 4 sons. I have 4 sons. My oldest son is 100% illiterate. I should show you how he writes me a note in English. He's worse than your Mandarin, worse than your Chinese. My mother sent me to Lubavitch. It was not from Lubavitch home. But my kids went to Al-Teda. I didn't. My girls learned Limudei Chol. But my boys know a lot of stuff. But they don't know how to read and write. No one ever taught them. They know what's going on. They're not Batlanim, but they can't schreiben. So my second son told my third son, you better learn how to read and write English. And my third son told my fourth son, they didn't come to me. They should have come to me because I wouldn't have given them. They're pushing afraid. They should bring up the subject to me. But they said to each other, that's in English. When you go out on a date, you have to know how to write your name in English. You're pushing down to write your signature. Amerikaner about the kinder. Whatever. They're okay. They're not going to starve. But they raised in Taras HaKedesh. The Rebbe, this same Rebbe, who in this way was so worldly, when it came to us, he talked about Tan and Kedusha. Purity and holiness. And I want to tell you the spirit of it. Not the letter of the law, but the spirit. I want to tell you the spirit of it. There's a famous Sikh from the Rebbe, which everybody knows about. A part of it is printed in Likutei Sichos, and much of it is lost. Rabbi Yel writes that when the Rebbe spoke that Sikh, he used expressions that were frightening. Much of the Sikh is lost, but the Rebbe kept on saying, Simchatei shatnish. Simchatei, I can say whatever I think. And the Rebbe was fire about Limudei Chol. Fire about Limudei Chol. Fire. So I want to tell you the spirit. Again, not the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law is as follows. How old is public education? How old is the concept of public education? The first country in the world that public education was America.
200 years.
It's less than 200 years.
170.
Before the public school system gave you Every American boy and girl gets a free education through 12th grade. It's unbelievable. Now, every Western country has the same system. There's no place in the world where you go, unless you're going to some primitive country, your kids go to school and they learn language and mathematics and biology and social science, and they get free lunch. There's a lot of kids who starve. The one meal a day that they eat to their satisfaction is they eat in school. The parents are poor. In school, in the public school, get they ask on the lesson. They eat a normal meal. It's hard to understand, but it's a fact. It's really true. Even in America, there's such children that the best meal a day is the meal they eat in school because their parents can't afford to feed them. But the school gives them gesund essen, healthy food. But not so long ago, the typical boy and girl was illiterate. Couldn't write his name. Mamish. Which children were educated? The rich ones. They had private schools. They sent them off to these boarding schools. You don't ask why. I don't know those boarding schools. But the rich kids were educated. Astam Azoy, the average person, Yid and non-Yid, couldn't read and write. Couldn't sign his own name. If you go to Ellis Island, how many people sign their name with an X? So then you can't schreiben. But Yidden always educated their children. In the worst of times, the poorest of children went to a Malamed. Now, the Malamed was the first class teacher, the guy with the old grouch who gave punches. But there was no such thing as a Jewish child who didn't learn how to read and write. Siddur, Chumash, Mishnayos. Till Bar Mitzvah, everybody learned to Cheder. After Bar Mitzvah, the brighter boys would sit and learn weiter. The much brighter boys went away to learn in the yeshiva. The typical boy would go to work in his father's business. They got married, 15, 16, they were married already. But there was no such thing as a Yiddish kind that didn't learn how to read Siddur. There wasn't Memtzias. We've been educating our children since Har Sinai. Since the Eibishter said, I'm the first Malamed, HaMalamed Teilam Yisrael, the Eibishter's first Malamed. Moshe Rabbeinu became the second Malamed, and since that time, Ma'ani Bechinim Avata Bechinim, right? Because the Eibishter's first Malamed, all Malamedim are broke. It's all his fault, because he didn't charge. Ma'ani Bechinim, you're God! So of course you don't have to charge. Ma'ani Bechinim, the guy's an independently wealthy multi-millionaire, so every Malamed is not allowed to charge, because the first Malamed was the Eibishter that had plenty of geld. Sue him. Sue him, he's not in the spell. But that's the mitzvah advar. Ma'ani bechinim, the halacha is. You're not allowed to charge from a landis. You can charge for bittel's man. And Baruch Hashem, we figured out minimum wage. Und noch ein bisschen weniger for minimum for bittel's man. So anyway, but we always raise our children. Yeah. So the Rebbe says, we come to America and we make private schools. Everybody made private schools. In the beginning, there were not that many, right? After the war, how many private schools were in America? But by the time the mid-50s came around, every community built their own school. All the Chassidish yeshivas had their own schools, or the Litvish yeshivas had their own schools, or the Sephardic yeshivas had their own schools, or the modern Orthodox. And in every school was a half-a-day choil. Half-a-day English. You know that I heard from Rabbi Edelman, Rabbi David Edelman. He was from Baltimore. He was in Scottish through Rabbi Axelrod. He told us, he can't bring in yeshiva, yes, he told us that in 1940, the Frierdiker Rebbe was still in the Greystone Hotel. The Frierdiker Rebbe found out about the Talmud Tatus, about the day schools, the Jewish day schools in New York. How many Jewish day schools were there? There was Tatus Vidas, there was RJJ, Yaakov Yosef. I think Chaim Berlin was a day school, but it could be wrong. There was a school called Tatus Emes, which no longer exists. There were very, very few day schools. There were more schools for yeshiva bachim than there were for little kids. And Lubavitch made Achei Temimim, whatever it was, but Achei Temimim for kids. The New York State Board of Education at Gepaskint, that if you make a private school, they have to learn Limudei Chol in the morning. When the heads are clear, Limudei Kodesh in the afternoon. Why? The 3 R's, right? Rosha, Sheita, and Gas Ruach. R, and R. How Rosha, how the 3 are, the Sheita, Rosha, Gas Ruach. It's Alpikabol, you have to know the Gematria, as the bottom line is. It's Sheita, Rosha, Gas. The 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic. So the Rebbe came here, and the Rebbe said, what's this? 9 o'clock in the morning, Limudei Chol. In the afternoon, Limudei Chol. So he called up the schools. He called up Mr. Mendelovich from Terevidas, Oliver Shalom. And the other Meistis, and he says, what's this Limudei Chol in the morning? So he told the Rebbe, obviously through a shliach, this is a waste of time. The city is on this. Eish lahava, you're never going to win this. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says, if I will put in a lawsuit to the New York State Board of Education, demanding the right to give religious instruction in the morning, will you join? So they said, if it's not going to cost us any money, we'll join. You'll raise the money, you'll pay the lawyers, you'll fight the case, we'll sign the piece of paper. So all the Moistus Chinuch, you're talking about children now, RJJ and Teda Tmima, Teda Semis it was called, and Teda V'das, I think there was also Chaim Berlin and Lubavitch. There may have been one or two more, signed on this petition. The Frierdiker Rebbe hired, he didn't have a house, he was living in a hotel, hired one of the most expensive lawyers in the state, sued the Board of Education, and won. They told him there's no way you're going to get them to let you learn Kodesh in the morning. But he won. In the morning was Kodesh, afternoon was Chol. It was one of the first battles Frierdiker taught in this country. Anyway, so the Rebbe is sitting in 770, 15 years later, and he's saying, all of these Haredi Jews came from Europe. They survived the Holocaust, yeah? In the shtetl, they learned Limud Echol, I'm asking you.
No.
Every kid went to Cheder. Are you nuts? You had an angry Malabid with a stick who gave pets to touch a chumash. That was it. And Siddur. If a guy grew up and he wanted to become professional, he went to study then. But a school should teach you Chayil. Mitamo, you have a half a day Kodesh and half a day Chayil. And what bothered the Rebbe wasn't that there was a half a day Kodesh, half a day Chayil. What bothered the Rebbe is that nobody tried to fight. In other words, nobody even thought maybe this is wrong. Azaz Zakata, Yidden came to America, Haredi Jews, very frum people. And the moment they landed in America, they drank the Kool-Aid, and the Kool-Aid said that America is different. You're going to send the kid to yeshiva, you're going to have a cheder, he's going to Chassidus, he's going to Gemara, he's going to Halacha, he's going to Torah, he's going to Chumash. But Choyl, a half a day Choyl. So here it's 55 now, it's 15 years after the Rebbe came here. And the Rebbe spoke this scathing sikh. It was an attack. Mamash, an attack. And the Nekuda was, why didn't anybody contend? Why didn't anybody say, I am building a cheder for Yiddish and Kinder? A half a day chol, 4 hours kodesh for a chol. Can't we do it a little bit less? And the Rebbe went off the handle on that. The Rebbe said, Jews in the worst of times, under the most anti-Semitic conditions, did not take orders from Goyim and Goyishkeit about the children's education. This is a free country, which gives you rights. And as the Rebbe would always say, it even helps you pay for the school. It provides you with busing, maybe it gives you books, maybe it gives you food money. The school, the government finds a way of helping from schools, even though it's against, there's the separation of church and state. And nobody has thought for a minute, maybe we should contend. So the Rebbe got upset about the fact, but more importantly, or more passionately, about the lack of protest. We came to this country, and we became like the country. You know, this happened over and over again. Many, many years ago, I read an article in the Reader's Digest about a family that got a television. It's 1953. It's 1953, and this boy is writing an article that he went to public school, and after school, him and a girl who were the same age would walk home from school together. They'd pass by the lake, they would throw rocks into the pond, and they would go by the swings, they would play on the swings, and it took them like an hour and a half to get home. They had all these stops on the way where they would stop when they would fabrek. And one day, they were kids. One day, the boy says to the girl, or the girl says to the boy, if I got that prat, tomorrow we can't walk home together. He says, why not? Because we got a television. So I'm going straight home so I can watch television. And I want you to know, you're not allowed to come to my house. I'm not allowed to invite you to your house. Maybe on a special occasion, I'll let you into my house so you could watch television with me. And the guy says it was the last time we played on the swings in our lives. It was the last time we threw pebbles into a pond. It was the last time we walked through the forest and picked up a tree and broke the branches. Watching television.
This is not new.
Oh.
No, I thought we invented those.
And the article is so candid. The article is so brilliant. But you think that television was a problem. So I'm with an internet, the World Wide Web. I remember when it came out, it was this 90s. And women are coming to 7-7, you heard? And I said to the lady who told me about it, you have internet? She said, of course, why would I not get it? I said, I don't understand. I personally don't understand. It never crossed your mind that maybe this is complicated? It's an amazing, she's telling me all the good things that it could do. You keep it Makarev, this one Makarev, this one. And if you rearrange the letters, Makarev in a second becomes Makaber. We had kids in Crown Heights who in the 1990s were slept into a park by a pedophile. We had mices, 1 or 2 or 3, which some man posed as a teenage boy, mit verschleppter Mädel, mit verschleppter Jingel, and mit gehabt, it's a sakona. But the word was not that we got internet. Nobody even questioned it. First go and get it. And then say 6 months later, oh no. Forget about what happened to my kids. What happened to me? It used to be a woman walks up Kingston Avenue with a baby carriage and finish a sentence. She's talking to the baby. Uh-huh. Now she's walking up Kingston baby carriage and she's on her phone. It doesn't matter, she's only 3 months old, he doesn't understand. Really? Those conversations that the mother had with the 3-month-old, that the 3-month-old is never going to remember, that's what made him normal. But the mother's on the phone. So there's a double kasha. Why is the mother on the phone? And why didn't the mother ask herself, is it good or bad? Someone offers you a piece of food, you eat it, or you say, is it kosher? So some people just eat it. If you gave it to me, some people say, where's it from? What's the hechsher? Yeah. But there's areas in our lives where we just don't ask. And we watch this happen to us. It started with the internet. I remember the iPod was a big deal, which had many songs on it, a whole big new technology. And now the cell phone, yeah. The problem with all this technology is A, it's a sakana. B, we never even entertain the question of the sakana that it is. So in 1955, which is 70 years ago, the Rebbe screamed about the Chol. And he said, what bothers me the most is that nobody was bothered. You come to America, you take a Yiddish kid that in Hungary and in Galicia and in Poland would never have learned Limudei Chol. Never! And without one lawsuit, without one government intervention, all of the Moises have Chol. And it ate the Rebbe up. It ate him up. That's why they made all the Teda. The Rebbe wanted Taras HaKedesh. The Rebbe wanted Taras HaKedesh. A Jewish child goes to school and gets a Jewish education. Now this value, this principle, is the extreme opposite of the other Lubavitch, of what really is the Ikir. But the Rebbe wanted, the Rebbe Toizgefit, the Rebbe fought for this. The Rebbe said publicly that if an American boy speaks English with an accent, it's okay. If he can't read the street side, it's okay. The Rebbe was trying to make a point. The point that Rebbe was trying to make was don't raise illiterate, stupid kids. The Rebbe's point was raise Jewish children. What's a Jewish child? A Jewish child is mitzvahs, is Torah, is Yiras Shamayim. Choil is exactly that. It's choil. It's choil. What does choil mean? It's trust. It's not what defines us. We all grow up. We all have to face the world. We all have to deal with the world. But our children we protect. Our children we put into a safe environment. Our children we try to give pure Kedusha and Tada. This is how Jews always were. And the Rebbe was bothered by the fact that this existed, but he was doubly bothered by the fact that it didn't bother anybody. Verstehst? So anyway, let's make a sachakel. I want to make a point. This is part of Yutzvat. This is a whole nother Rebbe. It's a whole nother Chassidus. It's a whole nother Yutzvat. And if you had to say it in adult oisius, let's take the children out of it. Let's talk about us. The halacha is, the Gemara says this, and the halacha is as well, but it's brought in Shas. If a person finishes the whole Torah, which I don't think has happened to anybody in this room, yeah? But let's say, a person finished the whole Torah, he finished the whole Torah, Kol Torah Kula, Bavli and Yerushalmi and the Safra, the Zafid, the Mechilta, all the halachas for them. Rishonim and Achreinim, the halacha with the poskim, with the daily Achreinim. If someone finishes the Gemara brings, if I finish the whole Torah, should I go and learn other chokhmas? And the Gemara answers, "V'dibarta bam la yehei diborcha el bam v'leil b'chedem." You finish Kol HaTorah, cool, learn it again. A Jew does not engage in anything except Torah. Now, it doesn't mean he doesn't know it, but that's not where he lives. The Yid's Metzias is Yiddishkeit, and that's it. That's all. The world of a Jew is defined by Judaism and not defined by open-mindedness. If I had to put this into words, I'm having a little bit of difficulty of atheist, but yeah, a person's learning Torah. Yeah, what room is there for comparing Torah to science? You're studying Gemara about anatomy, you're studying Gemara about biology, you're studying Gemara about agriculture, yeah? And there's science has whole fields of study in all of these areas, and of course, usually, the science and the Torah are going to have a very, very hard time fitting in the same book because it's not apples and oranges, you know, it's two worlds. And you are learning Torah. And you are a smart guy, and you know what's going on in the world. You say, but you know, Torah says this, and science says this, and how do we figure it out? Now, what's the answer to that question? The correct answer to that question is, I am learning Torah, period. What science says is not a part of my conversation. I have a kasha. I'll either find it Torah, so I want to find it, but there's no part of my limud Torah which is connected to Chachmas Chitzenius. Because Torah is Chachmas Shalom HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When I'm learning Torah, I'm learning Hashem's wisdom. I'm trying to understand Hashem's wisdom. The difficulties that I may have from another Chachma, the answer to that question is, why did you learn it? There's a Chassidish purity here. There's a Chassidish purity here. Chassidus is about amunah. Chassidus is about purity of mind and heart and soul and spirit, and that's how this plays out in America. So the same Rebbe, who says that my concern is that a Jewish boy should marry a Jewish girl, and it'd be nice if they learned to Shia and Torah. It'd be nice, but that's not the goal. The same Rebbe who speaks to us about the idea of a dibarta v'lo b'leiv machedim. A Yid's life is Torah, and that's it. We are not open-minded. I don't know how the whole world looks at Lubavitch as open-minded. When you look at the word as Lubavitch is open-minded, A, you don't understand Lubavitch. B, Lubavitch doesn't understand itself. Lubavitchers are not open-minded. We are as closed-minded as anybody could be. Very fundamental. Fundamentalist. We're out in the world. We speak the world's language, but we're not a part of it. The values of the Rebbe are values of Torah Tmima, not Torah Derecheretz, and for sure not Torah Umada. Those are not Lubavitcher values. Lubavitcher values are Torah Tmima. Deceased guy, brilliant man, a genius, brilliant man. He was Lubavitcher, my father, but he had a lot of problems with Lubavitch, huge problems with Lubavitch. He never would say that he had tightness to the Rebbe, but all of his tightness were against the Rebbe, because it was all the Rebbe. But he blamed it on us. He used to say, I met a shliach, and I asked the shliach, you go on a campus, and a kid asks you a question about this philosophy and that philosophy, and you're unprepared. You can't answer the question. The kids are asking you questions about Torah Umad, and he says, they should give every Lubavitcher shliach training. They should study this philosopher and this philosopher and this philosopher. They should know all the shtusim shabaylam for Dam Ashtash Apakadis. So he says this to me, and my uncle was a great shtecher. His favorite pastime was to make you feel like a fool. That was his whole thing. So he would ask me this question, and he would rather jab me in. So I said to him, if you learn all that chokhmah, you'd be a brilliant guy. But he won't go on shlichus. He just won't do it. He says, no, you don't understand. The chaver will go on campus, have to be trained. You're right, it would be nice if every Lubavitcher shliach spoke English flawlessly and knew the sciences and knew social sciences and knew politics and knew history and could speak. But you know what's the most important thing? When a guy goes on shlichus, he should represent God and not the university. Guy goes on shlichus. How does he represent God? He doesn't know what's flying. He knows what's going on. The open-minded shluchim are not necessarily the best ones. The Chassidus shluchim are the best ones. Why? Because if you go into the world and you're misspelled from the world, how are you going to change the world? You're a part of it. If you go into the world and you're above the world and you're five of the world, that's how you change the world. Yeah, but it doesn't. Your tie is crooked, and you don't know how to polish your shoes. It's Mama Shvaga told me. My brother went on shlichus in Seattle. Every Friday they would come to a maximum security office. It was a government office. The guy behind the bars was a Jew. He would never come out. They'd give him the thought for the week and they would leave. They'd never exchanged a word. He was behind the gate. Anyway, one Friday he comes with his chavrusa to this place, and they already knew they're going to hand him the thought for the week and they're going to leave, and that's the end of it. The guy comes out from behind all of his gates, runs out to where they were standing, and he was holding a can of shoe polish, and he sprayed their shoes. The Bacham didn't polish their shoes. So he sprayed their shoes black, and he went back in behind the mechitza, and that was it. He was teaching, it's like a mensch. The guy, their shoes are not polished. It's a big chesed. How do you say it? You know how you say it? It's a chil Hashem. It's a chil Hashem. It's a chil Hashem. It's a chil Hashem. The guy doesn't have polished shoes. It's a chil Hashem. You know what's a chil Hashem? It's a chil Hashem when people talk chochmas chitzenius and you're afraid that there's a shaila with the Eivish and Heilig Keteda. Oh no, the Gemara made a mistake. The Chumash made a mistake. Right? That's a chil Hashem. That's a chil Hashem. This is part of Lubavitch. This is part of the same Lubavitch, which is in one way so open-minded and the other way is so principled. We raise ourselves and we raise our children on values of Tad and Kedusha. You should know that's what the whole Chassidus is. The whole Chassidus, was a minute. A minute. You don't speak Polish. A minute. The whole time that the Chabad was that it's too intellectuals, too philosophical, you become a shtickle applicators. The whole Chassidus was a minute. And the sheet of Chassidi Poilin, of Admairei Poilin, Chassidi Poilin was 1 ounce of faith is more than 1,000 pounds of information that's intellectual. 1 ounce of pure faith is more valuable than 100 pounds of knowledge. Why? Because this is infinite and this is finite. This is infinite and this is finite. This is the Rebbe. You should know that this is our Rebbe. This is who he was. He went to college for all those years and he knew all the Chochmas Chitzenius. It was all Keklipas Ashur. It was Keklipas. The Rebbe told me the Rebbe once met a Gerach Chassid. The Rabbi Yossi. He was a Gerach Chassid from the Heim. And listen, and everyone has that time. Everyone thought they're young in college. So the Rebbe met him in Yechidus. So I said, ich verstehe nicht. Ger is Kotsk, you know that. Ger is Kotsk, yeah? The Mendele Kotsk was a Talmud of who? No. The Mendele Kotsk was a Talmud of Rabbunim. The Rebbe Rabbunim. The Purim Shishcha. Who was a Talmud of the Yidda Kodesh. The Yidda Kodesh was a Talmud of the Chayzer. The Rebbe Rabbunim was a pharmacist. He made medicine. The Rebbe Rabbunim was educated. Can you imagine? The Rebbe of all the Gereh Rebbes was educated. So this Gereh Chusid came to there was a big lamp in the Rebbe Dalia had. It was a gone. And he was explaining to the Rebbe that people have problems with him. So the Rebbe said, if was Zokman and Ger of the Rebbe Rabbunim. So how did the Gereh Hasidim deal with the fact that the Rebbe Rabbunim went to college? The Rebbe really, the Rav, Rabbi Yossi said he was in college with the Rebbe in Berlin, not in Paris, but in Berlin. He said the Rebbe came every day either with the Gemara or with the Tanya. He never paid attention to a lecture. He sat and learned the whole time. He was in the same classroom as the Rebbe. The professor loved the Rav. The guy was brilliant. I mean, the mind of the Soloveitchiks, he was a Gon Amiti, and he was a great student. But he hated the Rebbe Schneers, because he never paid attention. The professor. So he's sitting in class, and the Rebbe was holding his Gemara. So the Yashaber said, I'll also bring a Gemara. So the next day he came to school, also Gemara, and he realized he could learn Gemara, he could listen to the professor, but he can't do both. One day, the Rebbe was sitting and learning, and the professor was beside himself. He said, Schneerson, stand up. So the Rebbe stands up. Repeat the lecture that I just gave. And the Rebbe gave him back the lecture verbatim. The Rebbe was learning Torah. Anyway, so the Rav told another Maisa, that they had a big exam. And the exam was between 4 and 6 hours. Yeah? This is one of those classes the Rebbe sat the whole time and learned. So the Rebbe sat down to do the exam in a half an hour. The Rebbe hands in one page. Very, very small handwriting in German. He answered all the questions. The professor hated the Rebbe to start with because he didn't pay attention. And then the nerve to hand in a test like this after half an hour, it was nonsense. It wasn't possible. So the Rebbe hands in the paper, and in the Rebbe's presence, he throws it in the garbage. He throws it in the garbage. The Rebbe doesn't say a word, he leaves. The Rav finishes his exam, and the professor loved him because he was such a good student. And he goes over to him to hand in his paper, and he says to the professor, I know that you don't like Schneerson, but I know him. He is deeply intelligent. You may want to pull his exam out of the garbage. you may want to read for Dotnigishnip. And he did it. And he was mishtoimim. He couldn't believe it. A person should, in a half an hour, and it wasn't just how little time he took, but how precise his answers were. He was misspoke. They found in the Rebbe's files in Paris, the Rebbe's students, they said he was a great student, except he never comes to school. He came like 40% of the time. Less than half the days he showed up in school. But he did the ways that the Rebbe. We say the Rebbe is going to college was breaking the klipa of college. It had no tfisa smokum. You listen to the Rebbe talk.
Why did the Rebbe feel the need to go to college to begin with?
I don't think it was the need for an obligation. The Rebbe was a man on a mission. He was born with a mission. Story. I'll tell you, the Friedrich came to America. He saw what's going on, and he wrote a letter to his Rebbetzin about America. Unser Mendel mit sein Wissenschaft wird einer in America. Our Mendel with his knowledge will change America. The Rebbe changed completely. He saw what Yiddishkeit looks at America.
First trip, you're saying?
Yeah, and he understood what the Rebbe was doing.
This is before the wedding.
No, it was after the wedding.
Right after.
No, they got married.
No, I'm saying just timeline.
No, right, but
His first trip.
it was after the wedding. It was after the wedding. But as soon as the Rebbe came to America, the Rebbe had a mission. I know a man who told me that his uncle roomed with the Rebbe in Petersburg, in Leningrad. His name was Nimoitin. Father Nimoitin. He lived in Russia. He was a sheikhet. He was in Leningrad. When I was in Russia, in Leningrad, he was there. All the Bali Tshuva from Leningrad were his. He taught them shechita. He was a special chassid. He was out of beard, but he was more holy than all of us with our beards. He came to America to see the Rebbe, went back in the late 80s. He roomed with the Rebbe in the 20s in Petersburg, Leningrad. So he says they almost never saw each other. They slept at different times. They could have used the same bed. The Rebbe was very little in the apartment. But the joke was then, the Rebbe was in his early 20s. The Rebbe had to know everything. He just had to know stuff. If the Rebbe came across a new area of knowledge, he wouldn't pursue it casually. He wanted to know it till the end. The Rebbe had to know everything. He walks into the room, and the Rebbe is sitting and studying shorthand. You know what shorthand is? It's an alphabet,
Short writing.
which is very quick.
Like the court clerk.
Yeah. So Fuller walks in, and the Rebbe is studying shorthand, and he's laughing and saying, "Okay, you're submitted," because it was like a big joke. The Rebbe had to know everything. So he makes some kind of comment to the Rebbe about how the Rebbe is wasting his time with this nonsense, and the Rebbe says to him, "Das wird euch is coming. You'll see. I'll need this also. I'll need this also." The Rebbe was on a mission. The Rebbe, listen, how much did the Rebbe know when he was a young man who he would become? I'm not sure, but he had a pretty good idea. He had a pretty good idea that he wasn't just a Talmud Chacham, you know what I'm saying? He was a Talmud Chacham. The Rebbe had to know everything. Oh, but he's gelegen in them. The Rebbe was never, was not, there was a, there was a Yid in Williamsburg who was a Klezmer Mega Chassid, who was a big Talmud Chacham. He passed away recently. His name was Harav Fischel Hershkovitz. He was from the last Goinim before the war. He was a big lamb, he was a big Rav. He was a Chassidish Yid. Now, in that world, they don't have radios. And Lubavitch was treif. It started with the Tanya on the radio, Fabrengens on the radio, and then Shliches. Reb Mendel Wechter, as I gesund. You know what Mendel Wechter is? He was a Talmud of the Satmar Rebbe. He became a Lubavitcher. He lived in Williamsburg. He was very close to Fischel Hershkovitch. So when he became closer to Lubavitch, he started talking to Harav Hershkovitch about Lubavitch. And the same Tainus, a lot of the Tainus were they were repeating what they heard. They never bothered doing the Shechkire. So Reb Mendel Wechter says to him, there's going to be soon a Fabrengen on the radio. I'll bring a radio to your house. So you'll hear the Rebbe's voice. Chas v'shalom, if you go to 770, that will be like worst Aved of all. But you'll hear the Rebbe's voice. And after the Fabrengen, we'll take the klippe out of your house, and then we'll toivel your whole house in the mikveh. We'll make a kosher, we'll blowtorch the walls. So he's masking. So he brings him a radio, and the Fabrengen. The next day, the Mendel Wechter comes in to take away the timah. And just neat, what do you got to say? This was apparently the first time this man heard the Rebbe's voice. And he was very moved by the Fabrengen. And he says, I can't repeat the accent, but I heard the story with the accent. Yedis mu. Every time the Rebbe mentioned the Gemara, a Chazal. And the Rebbe used to quote from the whole Shas and all the Midrashim, but all from memory. There wasn't a piece of paper in front of him. Ayedis mu. Every time he quoted a Gemara or Medrash, you heard in his tone that these are words that are coming from the Eibishter from Sinai. Wow. He heard the Kedusha. He didn't hear the intellectual. He didn't hear the smart guy, the scholar, the braino who got it all figured out. He heard Kedusha v'Tara. This is the Rebbe. This is what the Rebbe wanted we should be. Our tiny is we worry about parnasa, really. A little bit worry about being embarrassed and looking stupid because my grandfather was born in America and I speak English with a Hungarian accent. It is pretty messed up. Not my grandfather came to America. My grandfather was born in America. But the Rebbe got a kick out of that. Huh? The Rebbe was cool. But the idea that these things are not important. So there's a part of us who wants to know stuff because they don't want to look stupid. And there's a part of us who wants to know stuff because they want to make a living. And the Rebbe wasn't not understanding of that. The Rebbe was talking about children. Hey, what do you give your children? What do you give your children? You know what the answer is? Gig. What's your first name? Rabbi Yoine. Rabbi Yoine, taka Yoine ben Amita, Yoine? Oh, Yoine, son. Yud Kei Vav Nasa. Just one name. It's a big name. Yohaneson, David, Shaul.
No, Yohaneson, Yechanan, Ariel.
Yohaneson, Yechanan, Uriel. We got to take this apart. I'm into names a lot. Ariel's the Beis Hamikdash.
Uriel or Ariel?
Ariel. Ariel's the Beis Hamikdash. Called Ariel. Yohaneson, Yechanan, Ariel. You know what you give your children? Honestly, what you give your children? You give your children yourself. You don't give your children what you tell them. You don't even give your children what you do, but that's to a great extent what you give them because what you do is what you are. What you believe, they'll believe. What you value, they'll value. What you respect, they'll respect. If you're embarrassed about your beard, they're going to be embarrassed about their beard. And they're just not going to have one. If you're proud of it, they'll be proud of it. And this is a very sensitive topic. In other words, in America, being smart is a big deal. By us, being smart is not a big deal. Being a chassid is a big deal. Now, all the brains in the world, if if it's, a Dean Steinsaltz, he was a pretty smart guy, Dean Steinsaltz. But he was a chassid. He sacrificed his brain on the altar of Emunah. What a pity, huh? What a waste. He didn't sacrifice his brain. He sacrificed his ego. He sacrificed making the brain into an idol. We want to give that to our children. To give that to our children, we need to have this. And it's a value. It's a value. The same Rebbe who's worried about a boy marrying a girl that's Jewish, the Veneflino. I think it's time to stop talking and sing a niggin or two. You see, you know what I did, Chavre? I brought along a driver who's going to turn into a pumpkin at one. It's a niggin from the Rebbe. From the Rebbe. Vehi shamda la vayseinu velanu shele yechad bilvad oh madaleinu lechalei zebeinu Yela shebechol der vader Eim dim aleinu lechalei sebeinu V'hakadosh baruch hu Hatzileinu mi. One more time. Vehi shamda Vayseinu velanu shele yechad bilvad amad aleinu lechalei zeinu yela shebechol der vader Eim dim aleinu lechalei zeinu V'hakadosh baruch hu Hatzileinu miyadam Hayala shebechal der vader Eim dim aleinu lechalei zeinu Hayela shebechal der vader Eim dim Aleinu lechalei seveinu Eim dim aleinu Eim dim aleinu V'hakadosh baruch hu Hatzileinu miyadam V'hakadosh baruch hu Hatzileinu haray Hayim dim aleinu Hayim dim aleinu lechalei zeinu V'hakadosh baruch hu miyadam Hayim Hatzileinu mi. V'hisham lo v'seinu, yeah? The loy echa b'vad am v'chal yiseinu.